This land did not measure time in human heartbeats. It measured it in the slow grind of mountains turning to dust, in the patient carving of rivers through stone. The wind was the only voice, and it spoke of eternity and indifference. Men had put a name to the year, calling it 1883, but the name meant nothing to the vast, aching expanse of prairie that rolled away to a sky so big it threatened to swallow a man whole. This was the West, a place drawn in shades of dust and blood, where mountains clawed at the clouds like a grim promise. The trails were raw scars on the earth, choked with a fine, alkali powder that coated a man's lungs and his soul. Along these trails, towns sprouted like stubborn weeds. They were places of rough-sawn lumber, false-fronted buildings that promised grandeur and delivered only whiskey and regret. Log cabins with thatched roofs hunched against the wind, their small windows like fearful eyes. In these settlements, and in the spaces between, life was a hard, brittle thing. The only law was the one a man could enforce with the weight of the colt on his hip or the strength of his will. It was a place ruled by the strong, and the rules of society, the ones whispered in parlors back east, were as thin and useless as smoke in a gale. Here, a man was what he could take, and a woman was what he could hold. Into this world, Dakota Hawk moved like a shadow. They called him Dak, those few who dared speak to him at all. He was a man made of the same hard edges as the land itself. He was the son of a chief, which meant he was the son of a memory. His people, his family, had been erased, wiped away in a torrent of gunfire and greed, a bloody footnote in the relentless march of men who believed the land was theirs for the taking. The smoke from that day, years ago, still clung to his clothes, still burned in his eyes. He had seen his father, a man whose presence was as steady as the mountain, cut down. He had heard the silence after the last shot, and that silence had become his home. Now he was a hunter, a trapper. He moved through the high, lonely places, his moccasined feet making no sound on the pine needle floor. He read the land as a scholar reads a book, seeing the story in a broken twig, a displaced stone. He was alone, but he was not lonely. He carried his ghosts with him, and they were company enough. He was tall, built with a lean grace that concealed a wiry strength. His black hair was long, tied back with a simple leather thong. His eyes were the color of the deep, cold lakes in the high country, and they missed nothing. They held the sadness of his past and the singular, burning purpose of his future. Dak's purpose was twofold, a hook in his heart pulling him in two directions. The first was vengeance. He carried the faces of the men who had destroyed his village etched onto his soul. They were land grabbers, men with pale eyes and empty hearts, led by a man whose name was a curse on Dak's tongue. He hunted them as he hunted the wolf, with patience, with cunning, and with a cold, clear intent. He would find them. He would make them remember the names of the people they had turned to ash. But beneath the rage, there was a deeper, quieter ache. It was the need for a place, not just a patch of ground, but a place to be, a place to stop running, a place to build, a place to put down the weight of his past. He hunted for revenge, but he longed for a home, for a life to replace the one that had been stolen. He was a warrior without a tribe, a chief's son without a people, and the emptiness of it was a canyon inside him. Hundreds of miles to the east, in a world that might as well have been on a different star, Eliza Montgomery was suffocating. She lived in a house of polished wood and thick carpets, a house where the windows were always closed to keep out the dust, or the heat, or the cold, or the sound of life. She was the daughter of a wealthy family, a pearl raised in a velvet-lined box, and she had been traded like one. Her husband was a man of commerce, a merchant whose heart beat in time with the stock ticker. He was not a cruel man, not in the way of fists or shouts. His cruelty was quieter, a damp, mildewing thing. He was a greedy man, but his greed was not for her body, or even her spirit. It was for her name, her connections, the respectability she brought to his new, raw money. He looked at her as he looked at his ledgers. A beautiful asset, properly acquired and duly noted. She was his finest possession, and he kept her polished and on display. Eliza was 24 years old, and her life had ended the day she said, "I do," in a church filled with lilies and lies. She was bound in whalebone and suffocating expectations. Her days were a meaningless ritual of changing clothes, of receiving brittle, smiling women who spoke in whispers about things that did not matter. She was expected to be decorative, to be silent, to be, above all, content. The discontent, however, had been a seed. It had taken root in the barren soil of her marriage and grown into a choking vine of desperation. One afternoon, while her husband droned on about a shipment of tea from China, she had watched a bird land on the window ledge, peck twice, and fly away. Just like that. The simplicity of it, the absolute freedom, broke something inside her. That night, she did not sleep. She watched the moon move across the suffocating damask wallpaper. She thought of the maps in her father's library, the ones that showed vast, empty spaces in the west. Empty, they called it, to her. It looked like a place to breathe. It was a place she knew only from sensational dime novels, a place of cowboys and wild Indians and impossible, sun-drenched freedom. It was a child's fantasy. She knew, but it was the only one she had. 2 weeks later, she was gone. She had packed one small bag, sewn most of her jewelry into the hem of her plainest dress, and walked out of the house. She left a note on her husband's mahogany desk. A simple, "I am gone. Do not look for me." She knew he would. Not because he would miss her, Eliza, the woman, but because he would be enraged by the theft of his property. She took a carriage to the train station and bought a one-way ticket as far west as the line would go. The journey was a clattering, jolting, week-long descent into a new kind of reality. The silk and velvet of the Pullman car gave way to the hard wooden benches of the territorial lines. The air grew thinner, the land flatter, then stranger, rising up in sudden, violent formations of red rock and pine. The people changed, too. The women were less, the men were more. Their faces were burned by the sun. Their eyes held a different kind of light. They looked at her, a lone woman, with a mixture of curiosity, pity, and a raw, appraising hunger that made her skin crawl. She had fled her cage, only to find herself in a wilderness she could not possibly understand. She was searching for freedom, but she was a lamb walking into a land of wolves. She had no plan, no skills, no concept of the hardness of the life she had chosen. She had only a name she had invented for herself and a desperate, burning need to be the author of her own story, even if it was a short one. Dakota Hawk, cleaning his rifle by the light of a low fire, looked up at the stars. He was tracking the men who had raided a settler's homestead 2 weeks back. They were the men he was looking for. He could feel it. Their trail was sloppy, arrogant. They thought this land was theirs, that they were the predators. Dak knew better. He was the predator. Eliza Montgomery, huddled in the corner of a noisy, foul-smelling stagecoach, clutched her small bag and tried not to weep. She had gotten off the train in a dusty hellhole of a town and was now heading further, to a place called Silver Creek, for no other reason than that she liked the sound of the name. The sun was setting, painting the high, majestic mountains in shades of purple and blood. The two of them, a man forged from the land's harshest truths and a woman fleeing a life of elegant lies, were moving. The vast, empty, unforgiving West was waiting, and it would demand everything they had. The stagecoach ride ended, not with a destination, but with an abandonment. Silver Creek was less a town than a wound on the landscape, a raw collection of tents and a few wooden shacks bleeding mud into a shallow, fast-moving river. Eliza stepped down into an ankle-deep mire that sucked at her leather boots, ruining them instantly. The air smelled of wet pine, cheap whiskey, and unwashed men. She had taken a room at the only place that offered one, A clapboard hotel that was really just a saloon with a rickety set of stairs in the back. Her room was a box with a cot, a pitcher of cloudy water, and a single window that looked out onto the mud trench they called a main street. For 2 days, she stayed inside, her courage, which had felt so bright and hard back east, dissolving into a cold, watery fear. She was a fool. She had traded a gilded cage for a filthy, terrifying one. On the 3rd morning, her meager supply of money was running low. She knew she had to eat, had to find a way to move on, though to where, she could not imagine. She forced herself to leave the room, to walk down the street to the building labeled General Store. She never made it. They had been watching her. She had felt their eyes from the moment she arrived, but she had tried to tell herself it was imagination. They were not imaginary. There were 3 of them, slouched on the porch of the saloon, their faces obscured by grime and ragged beards. They were the kind of men the land bred and then forgot, men whose souls had been sandblasted into something mean and sharp. One of him, a large man with a stained yellow shirt, pushed himself to his feet as she drew near. He blocked her path, a smile splitting his beard, showing ruined teeth. "Well now," he said, his voice a gravelly rumble, "look what the stage drug in. You lost, little lady." Eliza's heart hammered against her ribs. A frantic bird in a small cage. She tried to step around him. "Excuse me, sir." He shifted, blocking her again. His companions chuckled. A wet, ugly sound. "Not so fast. A lady like you refined, you ought not be traveling alone. It is dangerous out here." "Please," she whispered, the word stolen by the wind. "Let me pass." "Oh, we'll let you pass," he said. He reached out and snagged a piece of the lace on her cuff. "Right on over to our camp. We're in need of some refinement." He lunged. It was not a struggle. It was an unfolding. His hand, as big and hard as a slab of cured meat, clamped over her mouth. She tasted the salt and filth on his palm, and a scream died in her throat. Her arms were pinned. She was lifted, her feet leaving the ground. The world tilted. She saw the indifferent blue sky, the muddy street, the few faces in the town who quickly looked away, pretending not to see. No one would help. This was the law here, the law of the strong. They did not take her far. They threw her, like a sack of grain, across the front of a horse and rode out of town at a gallop. The world dissolved into a choking cloud of dust, the painful rhythm of the horse's gait, and the suffocating grip of terror. They rode for hours, deep into the rocky, pine-choked canyons that surrounded the town. The sun was a cruel, hot eye. Eliza's body was a constellation of new pains. When they finally stopped, it was in a place that felt hidden from God. It was a narrow, box canyon, the granite walls rising up on 3 sides, offering only one way in and out. A small, smoky fire guttered near a overhang, and several bedrolls were scattered on the ground. They pulled her from the horse and shoved her toward the fire. The man in the yellow shirt, the one who seemed Toby the leader, grabbed her chin. "Now," he said, his breath hot and sour. "You are going to be a good, quiet girl. You do that, and maybe we'll let you live to see tomorrow." She huddled on the ground, the fine silk of her dress in ruins, her hands tied in front of her with a piece of rough rope. The men ignored her for a time, passing a bottle of whiskey and laughing at some private, brutal joke. Eliza stared into the fire, her mind a numb, white blank. This was it. This was the freedom she had sought. She had run from a dull, polite death into the arms of a fast, violent one. Dakota Hawk found the tracks 5 miles outside of Silver Creek. They were fresh, 4 horses, shod, one of them carrying a double load, one light, a woman. His jaw tightened. He knew these men. He had been hunting them for 2 moons. This was the group, the same one that had left the homestead smoking, the one led by the man he wanted most. Their name was a whisper in the territories, a name that meant rape and fire. His hunt had been cold, patient, but this changed it. The woman was a complication. He cared nothing for the settlers or their troubles. They were the same tide, just a different wave, that had drowned his people, but the woman a captive. His code, the one he had forged in the ashes of his old life, did not permit him to ignore this. It was a weakness, he thought, this lingering piece of his father's honor. But it was there. He followed, not like a man, but like a thought. He moved through the rocks and trees. His stallion, a lean, tough animal as silent as its master, picking its way without a sound. He did not follow the tracks directly. He read the land. He knew where they were going. This canyon, it was a natural trap, easy to defend. They would feel safe there. It was a good place for an ambush, or a rescue. He left his horse a mile from the canyon mouth, tethering him in a thicket of aspen. The rest of the way, he went on foot, melting into the shadows of the late afternoon. He climbed the canyon wall, a difficult, hand-over-hand ascent that would have been impossible for any man who did not know the rock as he knew his own palm. From a ledge high above, he looked down. He saw them, 3 men, the fire, and the woman. She was huddled, a splash of dark blue color against the gray rock, her hair the color of pale corn. She was a white woman, one of the ones who belonged in the parlors he had only glimpsed from a distance. She looked small and broken, a flicker of something, not quite pity, but a cold, clear anger, moved in his chest. These men, they broke. They were a sickness on the land. His original plan had been to wait until dark, to take them one by one, to make it last. The woman changed that. He could not wait. He saw the way the big one looked at her. He saw the whiskey bottle being passed. Time was short. He checked the load in his rifle. He had his knife in his boot, and another at his back. He had his bow and a quiver of arrows. But the rifle was faster. This would not be quiet. He shifted his position, moving down the wall to a lower outcrop, one that gave him a clear view of the entire camp. He was perhaps 100 yards away. He rested the heavy barrel of the rifle on the rock, sighting down it. He would take the leader first, the one in the yellow shirt. But before he could pull the trigger, the situation changed. One of the other men, a skinny one with a twitch, got to his feet and walked over to Eliza. He kicked her. "Get up," the man snapped. "Boss wants his supper. You can cook, can't you?" Eliza flinched, scrambling to her feet, her tied hands held out in front of her. She shook her head, her voice a raw whisper. "I do not know how." The man laughed. "Useless. What good are you then?" He reached for her, his hand tangling in her hair, and pulled her toward him. Dak did not wait. The rifle shot was a flat, hard crack that echoed off the canyon walls like a thunderclap. The skinny man froze, a look of profound surprise on his face. A dark, flowering stain appeared on his chest. He fell backward, pulling Eliza down with him. She screamed. The camp exploded. The leader in the yellow shirt dove for his own rifle, shouting curses. The third man, who had been sitting by the fire, simply drew his pistol and started shooting wildly at the rocks above. Dak fired again. The third man's hat spun off his head, and he crumpled without a sound. 2 down. The leader, the big one, was smart. He did not stay in the open. He rolled behind a large boulder, using it for cover, his rifle now ready. He bellowed, "Who is that? Show yourself, you coward!" Dak did not move. He was patient. The man had one captive, and only one way out of the canyon. He was trapped. Dak had the high ground and the light. Eliza was on her knees, her hands still tied, frozen between the dead man and the fire. "Get to me, girl," the leader roared at her. "Get over here, or I will kill him when he comes for you." Eliza scrambled, weeping, crab walking backward, away from him, away from the dead. Dak saw his shot. The man, in his rage, leaned out too far from the rock, trying to see his attacker. Dak squeezed the trigger. The bullet sang through the air and struck the granite just inches from the man's head. sending rock splinters flying into his face. He howled, more in anger than pain, and ducked back. This was a standoff. Dak could wait him out, but the light was failing, and in the dark, the man might try to slip away, and there was the woman. Dak made a decision. He slung his rifle over his back and pulled his knife. He began to move, not down, but sideways, along the ledge, keeping to the deepest shadows. He was silent, a ghost in the twilight. He reached a place almost directly above the boulder where the leader was hiding. He could hear the man's harsh breathing. He could hear Eliza's quiet, terrified sobs. Dak put 2 fingers in his mouth and let out a high, piercing whistle. It was the call of a red-tailed hawk. It echoed, strange and lonely. The man below him tensed. "What was that?" he muttered. Dak pushed a small, loose rock with his foot. It tumbled down, clattering onto the stones near the man's boulder. "Who's there?" the man yelled. And he made his mistake. He leaned out, rifle aimed at the sound of the rock. Dak dropped. He landed on the man's back like a cat, his knees driving the man's face into the dirt. The rifle clattered away. The man grunted, the air forced from his lungs. He was powerful, and he heaved, trying to throw Dak off. But Dak was faster. His knife was in his hand. He brought it up, hard, under the man's chin. It was a brutal, efficient, and silent motion. The big man went limp. The canyon was suddenly terribly quiet. The only sounds were the crackle of the fire and the ragged, hitching sound of Eliza's breathing. Dak stood up. He was covered in dust and blood, though none of it was his. He looked at Eliza. She was staring at him, her eyes wide with a terror that had not yet begun to fade. He was an apparition. He was tall, his skin the color of the earth, his black hair long and wild. He had come from the rocks, a spirit of vengeance, and he had just killed 3 men in front of her with an ease that was more terrifying than the men themselves. Dak walked over to her. He did not speak. He knelt, his movements fluid and precise. He took his knife, wiped it clean on the dead man's shirt, and then, with one quick, efficient slice, cut the ropes that bound her hands. Eliza recoiled, pulling her freed hands back to her chest, as if she feared his touch, or the knife, or both. Dak stood up. He looked around the camp, his eyes assessing. He picked up his rifle, then walked to the dead leader and retrieved his own from the man's back. Where it had fallen, he checked the bodies, not for life, but for supplies. He took a water skin, a pouch of ammunition, and a strip of dried meat. He then walked to Eliza, who had not moved. She was a statue of terror. "They have friends," Dak said. His voice was low and rough, as if he was not used to using it. "They will come when these ones do not return. We must go." He turned and started to walk toward the canyon mouth. He did not look back to see if she was following. Eliza stayed frozen for a second. The dead men, the fire, the sudden, violent silence, and this man, this savage, walking away. Go where into the wilderness with him. He was as frightening as the men he had killed. "Wait!" she cried, her voice cracking. He stopped, but he did not turn. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Away from here," he said. "But She did not know what to say. "I cannot go with you. I cannot stay here." She looked at the bodies. She shuddered. She scrambled to her feet, her legs shaking so badly she almost fell. "Please," she said, though she did not know what she was asking for. Dak turned, his face unreadable in the dusk. "Come, or stay. It does not matter to me. But the wolves will come for them, and the men will come for you." He turned again and walked away. Eliza looked at the growing darkness. She looked at the dead. She took a deep, shuddering breath, hitched up the ruins of her dress, and ran after him. He took her to a place that was not a place. He moved through the darkness with a confidence that was inhuman. She stumbled. She fell. She ripped her hands on rocks. She cried. He did not slow down. He did not offer a hand, he just moved, a relentless, silent shadow in front of her. After what felt like an eternity, he stopped. It was a small, shallow cave, hidden behind a curtain of old man's beard moss, high on a ridge. It was dark and smelled of damp earth and animal. Dak went inside, disappearing into the blackness. He did not invite her in. Eliza stood outside, trembling with cold and exhaustion. She could not go on, but she could not stay out. Are you going to—" she started, and her voice failed. A moment later, a spark flared in the cave. He had made a small, smokeless fire, the wood so dry it caught instantly. In the small, flickering light, she saw him sitting, his back against the rock, his rifle across his lap. He was cleaning his knife again. He looked at her, his eyes reflecting the small flame. "In," he said. "The cold will kill you faster than I will." It was not a reassurance. It was a simple statement of fact. Eliza crept into the cave, a small, hunted animal seeking shelter with a predator. She huddled on the opposite side of the small fire, as far from him as she could get. The tension in the small space was a living thing. It was thick and cold and sharp. She was safe, for now, but she had been rescued from one kind of wilderness, only to be thrown into another. This one was sitting 2 feet away, watching her with eyes that held no softness at all. Eliza woke to a pain so deep it felt like it had become part of her bones. The fire had died to a pile of gray ash, and the cold of the cave was a physical, pressing weight for a terrible, disorienting moment. She thought she was alone. The terror of it was a cold fist in her stomach. Then she saw him. He was standing at the mouth of the cave, a silhouette against the pale, bruised purple light of dawn. He was utterly still, watching the world wake up. He had not abandoned her. The relief was so sharp, it was almost as painful as the fear. She tried to sit up, and a groan escaped her lips. Her body, accustomed to soft beds and gentle living, had been brutalized by the ride, the fall, the terror, and the cold, hard rock. He heard her. He turned, his face unreadable in the dim light. Without a word, he left the cave. She heard the sound of a small cascade of pebbles as he climbed down the rock face. He was gone. The panic returned, choking her. She was a fool. He had kept her for the night, and now, in the light of day, he was leaving her. She tried to stand, her legs buckling. She was dressed in the tatters of her silk traveling dress, a garment so laughably out of place it was a joke. Her expensive leather boots were scuffed through at the toe. Her hands were raw, and her hair was a matted tangle. She was a ruin. She had just managed to crawl to the mouth of the cave, her heart hammering with a new, desolate fear, when his head appeared over the ledge. He climbed back in, his movements fluid and economical. He was carrying a small, dead rabbit by the ears. He tossed it onto the cave floor near her. Eliza recoiled, a small, horrified sound escaping her. Dak ignored her. He knelt, took the knife from his boot, and with a series of quick, practiced motions, skinned the animal. He built a small, new fire, his hands moving with the same efficiency. He spitted the rabbit on a green stick and set it to roast. The smell of the cooking meat filled the cave. It was a raw, gamey, primitive smell, and it made Eliza's stomach turn. It also made her mouth fill with water. She had not eaten in what felt like a lifetime. When it was cooked, he tore a piece from the hind leg and offered it to her, holding it out on the point of his knife. She stared at the greasy, fire-blackened meat. "I cannot," she whispered. Dak's eyes held hers. He did not move, did not retract the offer. He simply waited. His silence was more compelling than any argument. It said, "Eat or starve. It is your choice." Her stomach made a loud, liquid, undignified sound. Shame and a desperate, animal hunger warred in her. The hunger won. She reached out a trembling hand and took the meat. It was hot and tough, and it tasted of smoke and blood. It was the most delicious thing she had ever eaten. He watched her eat, his expression giving nothing away. When she was done, he handed her a water skin. The water was metallic and cold, and she drank deeply. He then ate his own portion, devouring it quickly, his eyes never still, constantly scanning the land visible from the cave mouth. This was how they lived for 3 days. He would leave at dawn. She would be consumed by the fear of his departure. He would return with food, a rabbit, a brace of grouse. Once a string of fish he had pulled from a creek she could not see. He would cook. They would eat. He never spoke, unless it was a single word. Come, water, stay. Eliza's body began to heal. The bruises faded from purple to a sickly yellow. The stiffness in her muscles eased. But her mind was in turmoil. She was caught in a state of suspended animation, living a life that was not a life, entirely dependent on a man who was a ghost. She watched him, her fear slowly, molecule by molecule, being replaced by a baffled, intense curiosity. He was, as she had first thought, a savage. He killed, he ate, he slept, but there was a grace to it, a purpose. He moved without wasted motion. He made no sound. He seemed to be a part of the rock and the sky, an extension of the wilderness, not a trespasser in it. He was not like the brutes who had captured her. Their violence was chaotic and loud and ugly. His was quiet and precise and clean. He was a killer, but he was not a monster. This distinction bothered her. It chipped away at the neat, ordered world she had come from, where men were either gentlemen or brutes, civilized or savage. Dak was none of those. And all of them, he was strong. Yes, and free in a way that terrified her. He was a mystery, and the longer she watched him, the more he unsettled the very foundations of her world. On the 4th morning, he did not just bring back food. He brought a bundle. It was a pair of buckskin trousers, worn but clean, and a loose cotton shirt that had clearly belonged to a man. He had also brought a pair of moccasins. He dropped them in front of her. "These are better," he said. Eliza stared at the clothes. I cannot wear these." To wear trousers, a man's clothes. It was unthinkable. It was indecent. Dak had already turned his back. He was packing his meager supplies. "The dress is loud," he said, not looking at her. "The color, like a target. The wind sees it." He was right. Her dark blue silk was a flag in this land of brown and gray and green. She was a target. She looked down at the trousers. She thought of her husband's pinched face. She thought of the women in their corsets, sipping tea. A slow, burning flush rose up her neck. She picked up the trousers. She turned her back to him, though he was not even looking, and in the cold morning air, she shed the ruined tatters of her old life. The trousers were soft and warm, and they fit with a shocking, improper comfort. The moccasins felt like gloves on her bruised feet. She felt naked, and at the same time, more protected than she had ever been. When she was dressed, she said, "All right." He turned. His eyes moved over her. A quick, assessing glance. He nodded. "Once. We go." "Go where?" she asked, her voice stronger than it had been. "Further. Up." He gestured toward the mountains. "No," Eliza said, and the word surprised her with its sudden firmness. "I must go to a town, to Silver Creek. I need to get passage back east." Dak's face, which she had thought incapable of expression, changed. Something like amusement, or perhaps pity, twitched at the corner of his mouth. "Back east," he repeated. It was not a question. It was a statement, one that held a world of contempt. "Yes, I must return. You have saved me, and I am grateful. But you cannot keep me here. You must take me to the town." "I am not keeping you," he said, his voice flat. He shouldered his pack. "The town is that way." He pointed down, into the vast, rolling expanse of foothills and prairie. It is a 2-day walk. You will not make it. You will not take me. No. A hot, furious anger, an emotion she had not felt in months, surged through her. You are just like them, she cried, her voice rising, echoing in the small space. Dragging me where you will, deciding my life. I am not a piece of property, to be saved and then kept by you. He was at the cave mouth. He turned, and in 2 long strides, he was in front of her. He was so close she could smell the smoke and pine on his skin. He was terrifying. You are a child, he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. You cry for society. That town is not society. It is a gutter. Those men I killed. They had 4 friends in that town. They are looking for them, and they will be looking for you. You are a white woman, a lady. You are worth more than gold to men like that. You walk into that town. You will be on your back in a whore's crib before the sun sets, or you will be dead. That is your society. She recoiled, as if he had struck her. You do not know. I know, he said, and I am not them. If I was, you would have known it that first night. The truth of that, the terrible, unspoken thing he had not done, hung in the air between them. He had killed for her, and he had not touched her. I am hunting, he said, his voice quieter, but no less intense. I am hunting the men who did this. He gestured, a sharp, angry motion that seemed to encompass his entire past. They are the same men, the same sickness. You are a complication, a noisy, soft complication, but I will not let them have you, because they are mine. He was not protecting her for her own sake. He was protecting her as one might protect a piece of bait. Or perhaps, she thought, as a wolf protects a kill from coyotes. Not because he cared for the deer, but because it was his. The thought was both repulsive and, in a strange, deep way, comforting. You want to live, he demanded. She could only nod, mute. Then you will learn. You will learn to be quiet. You will learn to see. You will learn to be hard, like the land, or the land will break you. I will not let you be weak. Weakness is loud. It gets men killed. He turned and climbed out of the cave. Come, or stay. The choice is yours, but I will not be here when the sun sets. She watched him go. She was trapped by her fear, trapped by the wilderness, trapped by this man who refused to treat her as a woman, but insisted on treating her as a liability. She hated him for it, and she had never felt so alive. She scrambled out of the cave and followed him. For weeks, they moved. He pushed her to the very edge of her endurance. They climbed until her lungs burned and her legs were water. They walked until her feet were bloody in the moccasins. He taught her, not with kindness, but with a relentless, blunt reality. He showed her how to find water, how to read the bend of a tree, the flight of a bird. He made her skin a rabbit, her hands shaking so badly she wept with frustration and disgust. But he made her do it. You eat, you work, he said. He taught her to be quiet. She, who had been raised on chatter and polite, meaningless noise, learned the value of silence. She learned to walk on the balls of her feet, to step on rock instead of twig, to blend into the shadows. And as her body hardened, her mind cleared. The fog of her old life burned away under the relentless, high country sun. She stopped being Eliza Montgomery, the runaway wife. She was just Eliza, a person, a living, breathing, surviving thing. And he stopped being just the savage. He was Dak. She learned the cadence of his breathing. She learned that the small muscle in his jaw twitched when he was angry. She learned that he sometimes looked at the sunset with a sadness so deep it made her own heart ache in response. The conflict did not disappear. It simply changed. It was no longer about her wanting to leave, but about how she could possibly stay. She was bound to him, by gratitude, by fear, and by a growing, unwelcome dependency that was beginning to feel like something else. Then, the weather turned, the sky. which had been a clear, piercing blue for weeks, turned to a flat, oppressive gray. The wind picked up, a high, keening sound that did not sound like wind at all, but like something weeping. "Snow," Dax said. It was the first time she had heard that note of urgency, of near concern, in his voice. "We must find shelter." It came not as a gentle fall, but as an assault. The world vanished in a blinding, horizontal white. The snow was not snow. It was ice, needles of it, driven by a wind that stole her breath. She could not see. She could not breathe. She stumbled, falling to her knees. This was it. This was the death he had promised her. The land would break her. Then he was there. He grabbed her arm, his grip hard enough to bruise, and hauled her to her feet. He did not speak. He just pulled, dragging her through the blinding, screaming white. He found it, a cave, not a shallow overhang like the others, but a deep, dark maw in the side of the mountain. He shoved her inside, and she fell to the dry, dusty floor. He followed, pulling a large, stiff buffalo hide from his pack and rigging it across the entrance, blocking the worst of the wind, but not the sound. The cave was plunged into near total darkness, the only light a dim grayness around the edges of the hide. The cold was instant and bone deep. The storm was not a storm. It was a living, screaming beast, trying to get in. They were trapped. They sat for hours, or perhaps a day. Time ceased to mean anything. There was only the darkness, the cold, and the terrifying, relentless sound of the blizzard. Dak built a tiny fire, but the wood was damp, and it gave off more smoke than heat. They huddled near it, their backs to the cold rock, their face to the feeble flame. The silence in the cave was different. It was not the silence of the forest. It was a suffocating, intimate, and terrified silence. Eliza began to shiver, not from the cold, but from a deeper, more profound dread. We are going to die in here, are we not?" she whispered, her voice a small, lost sound in the roar of the storm. Dak was silent for a long time, feeding small twigs into the flame. "Perhaps," he said, his voice low. The simple, unadorned honesty of it, the lack of any comforting lie, broke something in her. A sob, hot and hard, rose in her throat, and with it, the words. "I left," she whispered, the words tumbling out into the dark. "I had a husband, a beautiful house. I had everything. Everyone said so, and it was empty. It was a prison. I was a decoration, polished and empty. I thought if I ran, I could be free. I thought I would finally be alive." She laughed, a short, bitter, terrible sound. "And now I am here, freezing to death in a hole in the ground with a savage." He finished for her. His voice was not angry, it was just quiet. "I did not," she began, ashamed. "It is what I am," he said. "It is what they made me." She looked at him, his face a landscape of hard angles and shadows in the firelight. "What did they do?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the wind. He looked into the fire, and for the first time, she saw something move in his eyes. It was not just the reflection of the flame. It was the reflection of a different fire, an older one. "You had a house," he said, his voice rough. "I had a people, a village. My father was a chief. He believed there was a way for us to live. He believed the new world could be shared." Dak's hand, which was resting on his knee, slowly clenched into a fist. "I was hunting. I was 16 summers. I was gone for 3 days. When I came back, there was nothing. Just smoke and silence. The new world did not want to share. It wanted to erase. They killed them all. The men, the women, the children. They burned the lodges. They burned the fields. They shot the dogs. For sport." He turned his head and looked at her. His eyes were not the eyes of a cold, dispassionate hunter. They were the eyes of a 16-year-old boy, trapped in a man's body, forced to look at the end of his world. "You ran from an empty house," he said, his voice thick with a pain so old it was a part of his blood. "I ran because my house was full of the dead." Eliza's own small, polite tragedy felt like a speck of dust next to this mountain of grief. She had run from a life she did not want. He had had his life torn from his hands, leaving a bloody, gaping hole. A profound, aching compassion, so strong it hurt, filled her chest. Without thinking, moved by an instinct older than words, she reached out. Her hand, small and pale, crossed the tiny space between them and came to rest on his clenched fist. His hand was hard as rock. He flinched, as if her touch had burned him, but he did not pull away. She said nothing. There was nothing to say. He turned his hand, slowly, and his fingers, rough and calloused, brushed against her palm. It was not a caress. It was a question, a moment of contact, two solitary, broken pieces of driftwood, touching for a brief, strange moment in a vast, dark, and storm-tossed sea. The wind howled outside, but in the cave, the silence had changed. It was no longer empty, it was full of their shared, unspoken pain. The space between them was still there, a chasm of culture, of race, of worlds, but in the dark, in the cold, a single, fragile thread had been spun across the void, and they both, with fear and a strange, hesitant pull, were holding on. The blizzard lasted for 2 days, 2 days of howling darkness, a lifetime compressed into a pocket of cold rock. The world was reduced to the small, smoky fire, the taste of dry meat, and the presence of the man sitting across from her. When the wind finally died, the silence it left behind was enormous, as if the world was holding its breath. Dak rose without a word and pulled back the stiff buffalo hide. Eliza gasped. The world was not the same. It had been erased and drawn anew. Every surface was covered in a thick, pristine blanket of white. The sun was a blinding, ferocious eye in a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The air was sharp and clean, so cold it burned her lungs, but it was pure. Dak stood at the cave mouth, breathing it in. He seemed, for a moment, to be a man made of prayer. Then the moment passed. He turned to her, his face practical. "We go." Eliza stood, her body stiff and sore, but the buckskins gave her a freedom of movement that was still a small, private shock. As she stepped out of the cave, the light on the snow was so bright she was staggered by it. She put a hand up to shield her eyes. "Do not," he said, his voice sharp. She looked at him, blinking. He took a piece of charcoal from the fire's edge and, before she could protest, he knelt and rubbed the black powder under his eyes. And then, under hers, "The snow will blind you," he explained, his touch impersonal, his fingers rough against her skin. "This will help." She stood still, her heart doing a strange, slow turn in her chest. It was the first time he had touched her in a way that was not pulling, or shoving, or simply functional. It was a kind of care, a practical, savage care. They moved down the mountain, and the world that had been a challenge before was now a new, beautiful, and deadly trap. The snow was deep, in some places, up to her waist. Dak moved in a way she could not understand, seeming to float on the surface. His steps sure. He was using the snowshoes he had pulled from his pack, a marvel of bent wood and rawhide. He had only one pair. She, in her moccasins, floundered. She fell. She cursed. She was soaked and freezing and exhausted within the first hour. He stopped, not with impatience, but with a kind of resigned acceptance. He went into a copse of young, slender trees and, with his knife, he began to work. He did not speak. He just worked. He cut branches. He trimmed them. He used strips of rawhide to lash them into 2 oval, awkward frames. He showed her how to tie them to her moccasins. They were clumsy, heavy, and ugly. But they worked. She could walk on the snow. She looked at the crude snowshoes, then at him. He was already moving. "You taught me," she said to his back, the words coming out in a white puff of air. "I taught you nothing," he said, not looking back. "I made it so you would not slow me down." And yet he had taken hours from their travel, from his hunt, to make sure she could keep up. The denial was a lie, a shield. She was learning to read the truth beneath his words. As they traveled, the snow receded, giving way to the lower, drier lands, and the lessons began again. He was relentless. He was no longer just her protector. He had become her teacher, and he was the harshest master she had ever known. "No," he said, his voice quiet, but stopping her cold. She had been walking, her mind drifting, and had stepped on a dry, brittle branch. The snap was as loud as a gunshot in the winter silence. "You are dead," he said, simply. "You have told the enemy where we are. You have told the deer I am hunting. You have killed us both." He pointed to the ground. "Rock, always rock, or soft earth. Never the dead wood. Do it again." He made her walk the same 50 yards of forest floor 10 times, until her feet, not her mind, began to learn, until she could move without a sound. Her old life, the one she had fled, had been built on rules. Do not speak too loudly. Do not show your ankle. Do not offer an opinion. Do not. They were the rules of a cage, designed to keep a woman small, and safe, and dull. This new world had rules. 2. Do not make a sound. Do not silhouette yourself on a ridgeline. Do not drink water without checking for the source. They were not the rules of a cage. They were the rules of life. They were designed to keep a person, not a lady, alive. Eliza found, to her profound astonishment, that she was a good student. The same focus she had been forced to apply to tedious needlepoint, she now applied to setting a snare. Her hands, which had been trained to play the pianoforte, learned the feel of a knife, the balance of a throwing stone. One evening, he handed her his bow. It was beautiful, a thing of sinew and cured wood. "You are too weak for this," he said, "but you will learn." He showed her how to stand, how to brace the string, how to let her back do the work, not her arms. She tried, and the string was a stubborn, unmoving thing. She could not pull it more than a few inches. Her arms trembled with the pathetic weakness of a lifetime of corsets. "Again," he said. She tried, her face red with effort, her hands shaking. She hated her arms, her body, her entire civilized, useless past. She hated him for making her see it. "Again?" She tried, and she fell. She sat in the dust, her arms aching, and she wept. They were not the polite, manipulative tears of her old life. They were hot, angry, frustrated tears. He watched her, his face impassive. He did not comfort her. He did not mock her. He just waited. When she was finished, she wiped her face with her buckskin sleeve, leaving a muddy streak. "I cannot." "You can," he said. "You are weak because you were taught to be. You will learn to be strong." The guilt came at night, when she was huddled in her bedroll, the fire low. She would stare at the stars, and she would think. She had run. She had abandoned her family, her mother, her father. They would be sick with worry. Her name would be a scandal, a whispered, ugly thing. And her husband, his rage would be a cold, methodical thing. He would have Pinkerton men searching for her. Not for her, but for his property. She had traded that civilized prison for this freedom, a freedom that was hard, cold, and terrifying, a freedom that meant being hungry and dirty and strong. She looked at her hands by the firelight. They were no longer the hands of Eliza Montgomery. They were calloused and scratched. The nails were broken, rimmed with dirt. She had skinned a rabbit that afternoon. She had not wept. She looked over at Dak. He was not sleeping. He was staring into the fire, his face lost in that old, deep shadow of his past. "You miss them," she said, her voice soft. He did not start. He had known she was awake. "They are not gone," he said, his voice a low murmur. "They are here." He touched his chest, just over his heart. "And here," he touched his temple. "They walk with me." "My family, I think of them," she confessed, the guilt a stone in her throat. "I hurt them. I ran away, and I hurt them." He was silent for a long time. "It is a different kind of hurt," he said, finally. "You chose to leave a life. My life was taken. Your family, they sleep in a soft bed. They mourn a ghost. My people, their bones are in the dust. It is not the same." The words were hard, but they were true. They were not comforting, but they were honest. He was always honest. She preferred it to the soft, polite lies of her past. Their bond was not one of gentle words. It was forged in silence. It was in the way he would hand her the water skin first. It was in the way she'd learned to mend the tears in his shirt with a strip of sinew. It was in the long, silent evenings where they sat by the fire, two solitudes, guarding each other. The feelings were deepening, like a river in a canyon, unseen on the surface, but running with a powerful, deep current. Then, one cold afternoon, he found the sign. He had left her to check his traps, and he came back to their small camp not with game, but with a look on his face she had never seen. It was not anger. It was a cold, white, terrible stillness. "Pack," he said. "Now. No fire." "Dak, what is it?" He did not answer. He was already kicking dirt onto the coals, scattering their camp with an efficiency that was terrifying. He was erasing them. When he was satisfied, he grabbed her arm. "We go." He pulled her into a thicket of rocks, a high, defensible place, and motioned for her to be silent. He drew his rifle, and they waited. "What did you see?" she whispered. "Tracks. 4 men. Shod horses. They are not hunters." "And the men from the town?" "The same," he said, his jaw a hard line. They waited for an hour. The silence was absolute. Then Eliza heard it, a faint clink of metal on rock. Dak had already heard it. He was a statue, his rifle resting on the rock, aimed at the trail below. 4 riders came into view. They were the same kind of men from the canyon, hard-faced, unwashed. They were moving slowly, tracking. They stopped at the place where Dak had doused the fire. One of them, a man with a long, drooping mustache, dismounted. He knelt, touched the dirt. He looked up, his eyes scanning the rocks. "They were here," he said, his voice carrying in the still, cold air. "Not long, an hour, maybe 2. Another man spat. "And the girl? Jed, you sure?" Jed stood up. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled something out. He held it up. Eliza's breath caught in her throat. It was a small, silver-backed hairbrush. Her hairbrush, the last foolish, vain thing she had kept, and it must have fallen from her pack days ago. "Found this 5 miles back," Jed said. "Right where we found those tracks from her fancy boots. She's with him, the Injun who killed the boys." "A white woman," the third man said, his voice a low, ugly, appreciative drawl. "With a red skin, that ain't right." "She's gonna be right, once we're done with him." Jed said, "The boss wants him, but he said the girl is a bonus." Eliza felt a cold, sick terror, different from anything she had felt before. They knew they were not just chasing Dak, they were chasing her. "They went this way," Jed said, pointing toward the rocks. "Spread out." Dak's rifle cracked. The sound was flat and final. Jed, the tracker, simply folded. He did not fall. He just crumpled, as if his bones had turned to water. The world exploded in gunfire. The remaining 3 men dove for cover, their pistols barking, bullets whining off the rocks around Eliza and Dak. The sound was deafening, The smell of sulfur and fear filled the air. "Stay down," Dak commanded. He fired again. A cry of pain. One of the men was hit. "We gotta go, Tom," one of the men yelled. "He's got the high ground." There was a scramble of horses, more wild shooting, and then the sound of hoofbeats, fading fast. Dak did not relax. He waited, his rifle still aimed, his body utterly still. For a full 10 minutes, silence. "They are gone," he said. "For now." He stood up, reloading his rifle. "One is still down there," Eliza whispered, her voice trembling. "He is not dead," Dak said. He looked at her. "He is wounded. He cannot ride." He started to climb down. "Dak, no," she said, grabbing his arm. "It is a trap." "He is not a trap," Dak said. "He is a message." He went down. Eliza watched, her heart in her throat. Dak approached the wounded man, who was clutching his leg, his face pale with pain and terror. The man reached for his pistol. Dak kicked it away. He knelt by the man. They spoke. Eliza could not hear the words. Dak was calm. He was not threatening. He seemed to be talking. After a few moments, Dak stood up. He did not kill the man. He walked over to the body of the tracker, Jed, and searched his pockets. He took a knife, a pouch of tobacco, and a box of cartridges. Then he walked back to the wounded man, who was now weeping. A high, thin, animal sound. Dak looked at him. Then he walked away, climbing back up to Eliza. "What did you do?" she asked, as he grabbed her arm and began moving, fast, in the opposite direction. "He will live," Dak said, his voice tight. "You let him go." "I told him he is to give a message to his boss, to the man who leads them. I told him the name of my father, and I told him I am coming. But he will tell them where we are. He will tell them about me." Dak stopped. He turned to her, his eyes blazing with an intensity that made her step back. "He will tell them," Dak said, "that I am not just hunting, that I am waiting, and he will tell them that the woman is under my protection, and that if they touch a hair on her head, I will not just kill them, I will unmake them. I will pull their world down, stone by stone, until nothing is left but the wailing of their women." He had not just sent a message, he had declared a war. And in that moment, Eliza knew two things with a terrible, shaking certainty. She knew that Dak Hawk was not just a man. He was a force, like the blizzard, like the mountain. And she knew that her old life was not just gone, it was dead. This was her world now, and she was not a captive in it. She was a combatant. They did not run, they moved. Running was for the hunted. Dak was the hunter. He had sent his message, and now he was preparing the answer. He led Eliza higher, into the broken, jagged teeth of the mountains. The air grew thin and cold, and the wind was a constant, sharp-edged knife. He was no longer just teaching her to survive. He was teaching her to fight. "They will be shamed," he said one evening, his voice a low vibration in the twilight. They sat in a crack in the rock, a place so high it felt like they were on the roof of the world. "The wounded one will tell them of my boast. He will tell them I let him live. They will be shamed, and they will come. Not with caution. They will come with anger. And anger is loud." "How many?" Eliza asked. Her voice was steady. She was surprised to find that it was. The woman who had wept at the sight of a skinned rabbit was gone. "He," Dak corrected her. "The leader, the one who gave the order to burn. He will come. He will bring all he has, maybe 5, maybe 10. It does not matter." "It matters," she said, her voice sharp. "It matters to me." He turned to look at her. His eyes, in the dusk, were deep pools of shadow. "You are afraid." "I am terrified," she whispered, and the admission was a relief. "But I am also angry." A flicker of something approval, respect passed through his gaze. "Good," he said. "Anger is a fire. It will keep you warm when the fear comes. He pushed a small, heavy object wrapped in oilcloth toward her. I took this from the one, Jed. She unwrapped it. It was a pistol. A Colt Navy. Heavy and smelling of oil and metal. It was nothing like the delicate, pearl-handled derringers some women carried back east. This was a tool for killing. She looked up at him. I have never fired a gun. You will learn, he said. This is not like the bow. It does not take strength. It takes stillness. And it takes will. You have the will. He spent 2 days teaching her. He made her hold it, aim it at a knot on a distant pine, until her arms no longer shook with the unaccustomed weight. He gave her no bullets. Not yet. Your body will learn the shape, he said. When the time comes, you will not have time to think. Your hands will remember. He taught her the knife, too. Not for throwing, for close work. He will be bigger, he said, holding his own knife, its blade gleaming. He will be stronger. You will not win a fight of strength. You fight with this. He tapped his temple. And with this, he tapped the knife's edge. Not the flesh, the places it joins, the knee, the neck, the eyes. You do not fight to wound. You fight to end. You must be faster, and you must be more angry. You must want to live more than he wants you to die. Eliza practiced. She moved. She spun. She lunged at shadows, the heavy pistol in one hand, the knife in the other. She felt ridiculous. She felt like a warrior. The two feelings lived side by side. Then, Dak found the place. It was a box canyon, but not like the one where she had been held. This one was a fortress. The entrance was a narrow slot between two sheer walls of granite, barely wide enough for a horse to pass. Inside, it opened up, but it was a dead end. The back wall was a cliff, impossible to climb. They will come in, Eliza said, her heart sinking. We will be trapped, like before. They will be trapped, Dak said. He pointed up at the walls. They are not climbers. I am. He showed her the ledges, the handholds, the places he could go where they could not follow. He found a place for her, a small, deep crevice in the rock wall, perhaps 20 feet up, accessible by a narrow, crumbling chimney of rock. It was high enough to be safe, but it gave her a clear view of the canyon floor below. You will stay here, he said. And do what? She demanded. Hide, cower, while you... You will fight, he said, and his words silenced her. He handed her his rifle, the one he always carried. She stared at it. Dak, your rifle. I am better with the bow in here, he said. It is silent, and I have other things. He gestured to the piles of rock, the dead, dry trees he had been dragging to the canyon rim. You are the noise. When they come, they will come for me. They will not look up. Not at first. He gave her the cartridges. He showed her, again, how to load, how to work the lever. One shot, he said. Make it still. Then the lever. Then another. Do not be fast. Be final. Aim for the center of the noise. He gave her the pistol, too. This, he said, his voice low, is for if they find you, for if you are close. Or for me, she asked, her voice flat. His eyes met hers. That is your choice, he said, but you are not the woman who runs. Not anymore. You are the woman who fights. He touched her face, his fingers, rough as bark, just brushing her cheek. It was a brand. Be still, he said. Be strong. Then he was gone, moving up the rock wall like a spider, a ghost. Eliza climbed to her post. She settled into the crevice. She laid out the rifle, the pistol, the box of ammunition. She was cold. She was shaking, but a strange, cold calm had settled over her. She was the daughter of a rich man, the wife of a merchant, a lady, and she was sitting on a rock ledge with a rifle in her lap, waiting to kill men. The absurdity of it was a small, hard, hysterical bubble in her chest. She waited for a full day. They came on the second morning, just after dawn. The light was gray and flat, making the world look like an ash heap. She heard them first. The sound of horses, the murmur of male voices. Too confident. 6 of them. They rode into the canyon's mouth, wary but not afraid. They were led by a man on a big black horse. He was a large man, with a full, dark beard and a long, expensive-looking coat. He looked like a governor, or a banker. He did not look like the leader of a band of murderers. He was the one. Dak had described him. The man who had sat on his horse and watched the village burn. They rode into the center of the small, clear space and stopped. "Hawk!" the leader yelled, his voice booming. "I know you are here. You red bastard! You sent me a message. I am here. Come and face me, you coward!" Silence. The men fanned out, their rifles ready, their eyes scanning the ground-level shadows. They did not look up. Dak's arrow came from nowhere. It was silent. The man on the far right, a small, wiry man, just stopped. He looked down, a look of profound, almost comic surprise on his face at the feathered shaft that had suddenly sprouted from his chest. He slid from his horse like a sack of wet feed. The world exploded. "Ambush!" one man screamed. The leader, the man in the long coat, was good. He was off his horse in a second, diving behind the cover of the animal. His own rifle out. "Find him! He is on the walls!" Another arrow. Another man fell, clutching his throat. 4 left. "There!" one of them yelled, pointing up at the rim. He had seen a shadow. He fired. The bullet whined, ricocheting off the granite. Eliza's hands were slick with sweat. Her heart was a drum against her ribs, the center of the noise. The man who had shouted was in the open. Reloading, he was her target. She raised the rifle. It was so heavy, she rested the barrel on the rock. She sighted. She saw him. He was a man. He had a face, a beard. He was breathing. "Be still." She pulled the trigger. The sound was apocalyptic. It was a roar, a kick of thunder against her shoulder that she had not expected. The smoke, thick and acrid, blinded her for a second. When it cleared, the man was on the ground. He was not moving. She had done it. She did not have time to think. She was a machine. Work the lever, the smell of the brass, the new cartridge. Sliding in. Be final. "She is up there!" a voice screamed. A bullet struck the rock just above her head, sending a spray of stone chips into her face. She screamed, a small, animal sound, and ducked back. They knew where she was. Down below, the fight had changed. Dak had used his distraction. He was no longer on the rim. He had dropped into the canyon, a shadow among the horses. One of the bandits, a big man, turned, and Dak was on him. It was not a fight. It was an execution. The knife, the one she had seen him cleaning 100 times, was a blur. The man gasped and fell. 3 left, the leader and 2 others. They were back to back. Now, in the center, their horses gone. "He is in here," the leader roared. "Kill him!" Dak was behind a pile of rocks. An arrow. One of the men spun, an arrow in his thigh. He screamed, a high, terrible sound. 2 left, the leader and 1 other. "Cover me!" the leader yelled. He began to run, not toward Dak, but toward the wall, toward Eliza. He had seen her. He knew where she was. He was coming for her. The other man laid down a spray of fire, bullets thudding into the rocks around Dak's position. Eliza's hands were shaking so hard she could not hold the rifle. "He is coming! He is coming for me!" The leader was at the base of her chimney. He was climbing. He was fast. The pistol! She dropped the rifle. Her hands fumbled for the Colt. It was heavy, so heavy. She looked down. His face, bearded and dark with rage, was just feet below her. He was reaching, his hand grasping for the ledge. She pointed the pistol. She did not aim. She just pointed and pulled the trigger. A click. It was empty. No, no, she had not. She had not loaded it. Dak had given her the gun. He had taught her, but she had not. The man's hand closed on the ledge. He laughed, a deep, ugly sound. "Stupid bitch!" He spat. He began to haul himself up. Eliza did not scream. The anger, the fire Dak had spoken of, erupted. She did not fight like a lady. She fought as he had taught her. She grabbed the first thing she could find, a loose, heavy rock, and she brought it down, with all of her strength, on the man's hand. There was a sound, a wet, heavy, crunching sound. The man roared, a sound of pure agony, and his grip broke. He fell. He did not fall far. He landed on a ledge, perhaps 10 feet below. His body twisted at a strange angle. His hand was a ruin, but he was alive. And he was looking at her with a hatred that was a physical, burning thing. At the same time, below, the last man, the one who had been covering the leader, made a run for the canyon entrance. Dak stepped from the shadows. He was not a man. He was a red-brown angel of death. He was on the man's back, and the fight was over in a second. And then there was silence. A terrible, ringing silence, broken only by the groans of the wounded man on the ledge below her, and the frantic, high-pitched screaming of the one with the arrow in his leg. Dak stood alone in the center of the canyon, surrounded by the dead. He was breathing hard. He was covered in blood. He looked up at her. His face was a mask of war. She stammered. He is here. She pointed. Dak nodded. He began to climb, not up her chimney, but on the outside wall. He was coming for the leader. The leader, the man with the ruined hand, saw him. He was trapped. He drew his own pistol with his good hand. "Come on, then," he screamed. "Come on, you red dog. Let us finish this." Dak did not hurry. He climbed, his movements fluid, certain. He reached the ledge. The man fired. The shot was wild. Dak did not fire. He did not use his bow. He launched himself from the wall, and the two men met, a tangle of limbs. On the narrow ledge, it was a knife fight, a brutal, desperate, close thing. It was not a battle of skill. It was a battle of rage. Eliza watched, horrified. It was a dance of death. They were grunting, stabbing, rolling, inches from the edge. Then it was over. Dak rose. He was swaying. His shirt was a dark, wet red. He was wounded, badly. The leader, the man who had burned his village, was gone. He had fallen. Dak turned to her. He looked at her. And then, his legs seemed to give out. He did not fall. He slid, his back to the rock, and sat, hard, on the ledge. "Dak!" she screamed. She scrambled down the chimney, her mind a blank white noise of terror. She ran, stumbling over the rocks, to the ledge where he was. The wounded man with the arrow in his leg was weeping, trying to crawl away. She did not even see him. She got to Dak. He was leaning against the wall, his eyes closed. A deep, terrible gash was on his side, just under his ribs. It was bleeding. It was bleeding too much. "No," she whispered. "No, no, you cannot, you—" She pressed her hands to the wound. The blood was hot, and so much of it. It pulsed against her palms. "Dak," she wept, the tears coming now, hot and fast. "Dak, look at me." His eyes opened. They were cloudy with pain. He looked at her. He saw her. He tried to say something. His lips, caked with dust and blood, moved. "Go," he whispered. "Go." "I am not going," she said, her voice a fierce, broken, animal sound. She was no longer a lady. She was a woman. She was his woman. "I am not leaving you." She leaned in, her body shielding his, as if her small frame could hold his life in. The sun was beginning to set, and the canyon was filled with a bloody, golden light. It was all over, and it was just beginning. She put her forehead against his, her tears mixing with the sweat and blood on his skin. She could feel his breath, shallow and hot, on her face. She put her lips to his ear, and the words came. They were not a plea. They were a command. They were a vow. "Stay," she whispered, her voice a raw, desperate thing, more prayer than promise. "Stay, you're my breath. Never let me go." He did not speak. He did not have the strength, but his hand, the one that was not slick with his own blood, moved. It found hers, the one that was not pressed to his side. His fingers, weak but still so strong, closed around her. He stayed. The canyon was a tomb, filled with the dying light of the sunset and the smell of blood. The silence that followed the battle was a living, breathing thing, heavier than any of the bodies that lay cooling on the stones. Eliza's hands were slick, her fingers numb, as she pressed them into the ragged, wet gash in Dak's side. The blood was hot. It was his life, and it was leaving him, pulsing out between her palms in a rhythm that was already slowing, already faltering. "No," she said again, the word a raw, animal sound in her throat. "No, you stay. Do you hear me? You stay." His eyes were closed. His hand, which had gripped hers, had gone slack, but his breath was still there, a shallow, hitching rasp. Down on the canyon floor, the man with the arrow in his leg began to wail, a high, thin sound of terror and pain. "Help me, oh God! Help me, it hurts!" Eliza did not look. He was noise. He was nothing. There was only Dak. "Anger is a fire. It will keep you warm." Dak's words, a cold, clear, brilliant rage cut through her panic. She was not a lady. She was not a victim. She was a woman in a canyon of dead men, and the only living thing she cared about was dying. "You will not," she said, her voice low and tight. She was not speaking to him. She was speaking to the death that was hovering in the cold air. She pulled her hands away, and he groaned. The blood welled, dark and terrible. "All right," she whispered, as if soothing a horse. "All right." She needed to stop it. She needed to bind it. She grabbed the hem of her own buckskin shirt, the one he had given her. She took the knife from his sheath, his knife. It felt heavy, an extension of him, and she cut. She sawed at the tough, smoked hide, her hands shaking, but not from fear, from urgency. She cut long, rough strips. She wadded one, a piece of the softer cotton shirt she wore beneath, and pressed it hard into the wound. Dak's body arched in a silent scream of agony, and then he went limp. "I am sorry," she whispered, her tears hot, falling onto his face. "I am sorry, but you will live. I will not let you go." She wrapped the buckskin strips around his torso, pulling them so tight she heard her own knuckles crack. She tied the knots with a brutal, desperate strength. It was clumsy. It was terrible. It was the best she could do. The wailing from below had turned into a wet, choking cough. Eliza ignored it. She had to move him. She could not stay on this exposed ledge. The cold was coming, and the wolves would follow the smell of blood. She put her hands under his arms. "Dak! Dak! Help me!" He was unconscious. He was a dead weight. She was strong, stronger than she had ever been. But he was a man, and she could not lift him. She pulled, and she sobbed, a single, dry, frustrated sound. She could not move him. "You need help." The voice came from below. Eliza froze. Her hand flew to the pistol in her belt, the one she had not loaded. She fumbled for the rifle, the one she had left on her ledge. "Stay," the voice said. It was calm. "I am not one of them." A man emerged from the shadows of the canyon floor. He was not a white man. He was native, like Dak. He was tall, dressed in worn leathers, his black hair tied back. He carried a bow, but no rifle. He looked at the carnage, his face unreadable. He looked at the man with the arrow in his leg, who was now holding a hand out to him, begging, "Please help." The newcomer walked over to the wounded man. He looked at him, as a man might look at a snake with a broken back. He looked up, and his eyes met Eliza's. "He is one of yours?" the newcomer asked. "He is nothing," Eliza said, her voice a croak. The newcomer nodded. He knelt, and with a single economical motion, he drew a knife and cut the man's throat. The wailing stopped. Eliza did not flinch. The man stood up. He wiped his blade on the dead man's trousers. He looked at her again. "I am Asa." "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice shaking, but not her grip on the pistol. I was of his people," Asa said, nodding toward Dak. "I am a brother. I heard the shots, many shots. I followed. I see he has found a new warrior." His eyes were not unkind. They were just tired. "He is hurt," Eliza said, the word a plea. "Badly. I cannot move him." "I will help," Asa said. He began to climb the wall, his movements as fluid and certain as Dak's. He reached the ledge. He was younger than Dak. She saw now. His face was leaner, the lines not yet carved as deep. He knelt by Dak. He touched his forehead. He looked at the bloody, crude bandage she had tied. "You have a strong hand," he said. It was, she realized, a compliment. "Is he—" "He is here," Asa said, "but his spirit is far away. We must bring it back." He looked at Eliza. "You trust me?" "I do not know you." "He is my brother," Asa said, his voice soft. "We were boys together. We saw the fire. We ran. I thought he was dead. He thought I was, for many years." He looked at Dak. "He has been hunting. I have been running. It seems he found them first." "This story, this shared past, it was a key." Eliza felt her terror ease. Just a fraction. This was not an enemy. This was family. "Help me," she said. Together, they moved him. Asa had the strength she lacked. They half carried, half dragged Dak back to the crevice where she had hidden. It was defensible. It was deep. For 3 days, the world was a fever dream. Dak burned. The wound in his side, which Asa had cleaned and stitched with a bone needle and sinew from his pack, was hot and red and angry. The fever took Dak, and he drifted in a dark, terrifying world where Eliza could not follow. He cried out, not in English, but in the liquid, flowing tongue of his people. He spoke names she did not know. He spoke of his father. He spoke of the fire. And sometimes he spoke of her. He would surface, his eyes wild and unseeing, and he would grab for her. "Eliza," he would rasp, his voice a dry crackle. "The white they are coming, run, you must run." "I am here," she would say, bathing his face with a damp cloth, her own voice hoarse from exhaustion. "I am not running. I am here." Not strong enough," he would mutter, his head tossing on the rock. "Failed you. My protection, it is gone." "It is not," she would say, her voice fierce, pressing her hand to his. "It is my turn. I am protecting you. You must stay. You must be still. I have you." And his internal conflict, his fear of losing her, of his weakness being her doom, would be soothed, for a time, by the calm, steady presence of the woman he had taught to be strong. Asa was a gift. He hunted. He brought back water. He knew the herbs, the ones to crush into a paste for the wound, the ones to boil into a bitter tea to fight the fever. He was quiet and respectful, and he treated her not as a white woman, but as Dak's partner. He called her Woman Who Fights. Eliza watched him, her gratitude a deep, aching thing. She had been alone, and now she was not. She and Asa formed a silent, efficient guard. While one slept, the other watched. And always, one of them was by Dak's side. On the 3rd night, the fever broke. Eliza had been dozing, her head against the rock wall, her hand on Dak's chest, feeling the rise and fall of it. She awoke suddenly. The air in the cave was different. It was still. Dak was not muttering. He was not tossing. His breathing was deep and even. She touched his forehead. It was cool. It was damp with clean sweat. She let out a breath she had been holding for 3 days, and it came out as a sob. "He is back," Asa said from the mouth of the cave. He was a shadow against the stars. "He is back," she wept, her head falling onto Dak's chest. "I will scout," Asa said. "The battle, it will have drawn attention. I will see who comes." "Be careful," she said, her voice thick. "He is my brother," Asa said. "And you are his. I will be careful." He slipped out and was gone. Eliza sat with Dak. She did not sleep. She watched him, the moonlight now painting his face. He looked peaceful. The lines of pain were gone. He was no longer a warrior. He was just a man. A man she. She did not have a name for the feeling. It was too big. It was a thing of blood and fire and survival. It was not the pale, polite thing they called love back east. It was something else. It was something real. She must have dozed. The next thing she knew, the sun was a gray light at the mouth of the cave. And there were voices. Not Asa's, not Dak's. White men, speaking English. The voices were not rough, like the bandits. They were crisp, professional. "Clean camp. The bodies are 2 days old. The Indian. Asa. He was right. They are here." Eliza's blood went cold. She moved, silent as a shadow, the way Dak had taught her. She grabbed the rifle. She checked the load. She moved to the mouth of the cave, staying deep in the shadow. She saw them. 3 men. They wore hats and dusters. They were not rabble. They carried repeating rifles, and their pistol belts were clean. They looked like lawmen. And then she saw Asa. He was standing with them, not as a captive. He was talking to them. He was pointing right at her. "He is in there," Asa said, his voice carrying in the clear morning air. "The hawk. He is wounded, but alive, and the woman is with him." A man, the one who seemed to be the leader, a man with a gray, trimmed beard and cold, pale eyes, nodded. He looked over at the cave. He took a small, thin cigar from his pocket and lit it. "Mr. Asa," the man said, his voice a polite, terrifying drawl. "You have done well. A tidy sum for the hawk, as promised. The UNT marshals will be very pleased to have him." "And the other?" Asa asked. "Ah, yes," the man said. He smiled, a thin, dry smile that did not touch his eyes. He looked directly at the cave, as if he could see her. "Your husband sends his regards, Mrs. Montgomery," the man said, his voice booming slightly. "An announcement. He is a very, very patient man, and a very, very rich one. He has paid us a great deal of money to find his property." The man was Mr. Stone, the leader of the Pinkerton men hired to find her. The betrayal was so absolute, so cold, it almost stopped her heart. Asa, her brother. "She is in there," Asa said again. And his voice was not the voice of the kind, tired man. It was the voice of a man making a deal. "So she is," Stone said. "Now, Mrs. Montgomery, you have 1 unconscious Indian, and we have 3 rifles. I want you to walk out, very slowly, and we can end this civilized." Eliza looked back. Dak was still sleeping. He was helpless. This was not a cage. This was not a prison. This was something else. This was a final, terrible choice. Eliza stood. She moved into the light at the mouth of the cave. The rifle was in her hands. It was not shaking. The 3 men and Asa all turned. They saw her. "Mr. Stone's smile widened. "Ah, there you are. Now, put the gun down. My dear, you have caused enough." Eliza raised the rifle. She did not aim at Stone. She aimed at Asa. "You," she said, her voice not a woman's, not a lady's, but a cold, flat, killing sound. "You, traitor!" Asa's face, for the first time, showed an emotion. It was surprise, and then a kind of dark, bitter anger. "It was a deal," he said. "The bounty on his head for a new life. He has his vengeance. I want a future. You are just a white woman. You do not matter." "I am his," she said, and the word, as she said it, became true. "And you will not have him." She stood, a lone woman, in the ruins of her old life and the blood of her new one, facing down her past and his. She was a warrior. She was a target, and she was all he had. The world, for a long, terrible second, was utterly still. It was a painting, the three men by their horses, the pale, cold morning light, the dark shape of Asa, and Eliza, a statue of rage, in the mouth of the cave. Mr. Stone, the man with the gray beard, was the first to move. He did not seem angry. He seemed amused. He took the thin cigar from his lips and exhaled a long, slow plume of smoke. "My dear Mrs. Montgomery," he said, his voice a dry, educated drawl, "you have, I must admit, become a great deal more provincial. Put down the firearm. It is heavy, and you are not in the habit." Eliza's hands did not waver. The rifle felt like a part of her. She was not aiming at Stone. She was aiming at Asa. "You," she said again, her voice low. "He called you brother." Asa flinched. His face was a mask of cold, hard stone, but his eyes were ashamed. "He hunts ghosts." "Woman," Asa said, his voice tight. "He is a dead man. I chose to live." "By selling him, by selling me." "You are a white woman." Asa spat. "You are all the same. You are the sickness. He forgot his people when he looked at you. I am making him remember." Now, Stone said, his voice cutting in, sharp and cold. "The moral debate is fascinating, but it is over. I am paid to bring you back, Mrs. Montgomery, and I am paid to bring him in, dead or alive." He nodded to his two men. "The marshals pay handsomely for Dakota Hawk." A new voice, weak but sharp as a piece of obsidian, cut through the cold air. "Then they will have to pay." Eliza's heart stopped. She did not turn. She could not. Dakota Hawk was standing in the mouth of the cave, just behind her shoulder. He was a ghost. He was pale, his skin slick with a cold sweat. The crude bandage around his ribs was dark, soaked through with fresh blood from the effort of standing. He was leaning one hand against the rock wall to hold himself upright, but he was standing. And his eyes were clear. They were not the eyes of a man in fever. They were the eyes of a chief, and they were fixed. Not on Stone, not on Eliza, but on Asa. Asa took an involuntary step back. The change in him was instant. The arrogant bounty hunter was gone, and a boy who had seen a ghost was in his place. "Hawk," Asa whispered. "You are down." "You were my brother," Dax said. The words were not an accusation. They were a judgment. They were a sentence. "Mr. Stone simply sighed. "Well, this complicates the narrative." He raised his rifle, its barrel pointing not at Dak, but at Eliza. "Mr. Hawk, you are a wanted man. Your companion is a runaway wife. You are both, in the eyes of the law, criminals. However, I am a businessman." He looked at Eliza. "Step away from him. He is the target. You are the asset." "She is not an asset," Dax said, his voice a low, vibrating growl. He pushed himself off the wall. He was unarmed. He had no rifle, no bow. He had the knife in his boot, but he was too weak to use it. He looked at Eliza. "Eliza, go! Go to them!" She turned, her face a mask of disbelief. "What?" "Go," he repeated. "He will not hurt you. Your husband wants you. You will be safe, back east, in your soft house. This was his internal battle. Not freedom, not love. It was this, he saw, in this one terrible moment, what his life had cost her. He had dragged her from a cage. Yes, but he had dragged her into a war. He had made her a target. His protection had failed. The fear he had felt in his fever, the fear of his weakness being her doom, was standing in front of him, dressed in a duster and holding a repeating rifle. "No," she said. "This is not your fight," Dax said, his breath high and tight. The pain was setting in. "It was never your fight. I am a dead man, like he said." "Then we will die," she said, and she turned back, and the rifle was at her shoulder, and she was aiming at Mr. Stone. Stone laughed, a single, sharp bark. "Oh, you little fool, you would die for him for this?" "I am already dead to you," Eliza said, her voice a cold, clear bell. "I am already a ghost. You want him, you come through me." She stood in front of a wounded, unarmed man, facing 3 rifles, and a traitor. Dax saw her. He saw the woman she had become, the woman he had taught, strong, still, and willing to make the final choice. And he realized, with a sudden, terrible clarity, that he had been the fool. He thought his quest for freedom was a solitary thing. He thought his vengeance was his alone. But he had been wrong. His freedom was her. Her freedom was him. They were the same. He had not tied her to him. They had grown, like 2 deep-rooted trees, intertwined, and if one was pulled down, the other would fall. "Asa!" Dax shouted, and the name was a roar, a sudden, impossible burst of strength. Asa, who had been frozen, looked up, his face torn. "You chose this," Dax yelled. "Now choose again." Mr. Stone, his patience gone, made his decision. "Kill them both," he ordered. The 2 Pinkerton men raised their rifles. Eliza pulled the trigger. Her shot was wild, a blast of smoke and terror. And at the same moment, an arrow sprouted from the chest of the man to Stone's right. Asa. He had his bow in his hand. His face was a mask of pure, agonizing torment. "Run, brother!" he screamed. "The back way, the way of the—" Mr. Stone, his face black with rage, did not hesitate. He turned and shot Asa once, in the chest. Asa fell, his eyes wide. Looking at Dax, he had made his choice. "Go!" Dax roared. He grabbed Eliza's arm, pulling her back into the darkness of the cave. The world erupted. The remaining Pinkerton fired, his bullet screaming off the rock where Eliza had been standing. "Mr." Stone was shouting orders. "Dax, your wound," Eliza cried, as he stumbled. "It is nothing," he lied. He pulled her past their small, dead fire, to the very back of the cave, a place she had never looked. It was not a solid wall. It was a crack, a dark, narrow, terrifying fissure in the rock. "Where?" "Go!" He shoved her. "Do not look. Just climb." Behind them, they heard the men entering the cave. A shot rang out, the bullet ricocheting with a high, terrifying whine. Eliza scrambled into the crack. It was dark. It was tight. She was climbing, her hands and knees scraping on the raw, cold stone. It was a tunnel. Dax was right behind her, his breath a hot, wet, gasping sound in her ear. He was pushing her. He was using the last of his strength to make sure she did not stop. "Dax, you are bleeding," she wept, as she felt something hot and wet splash onto her ankle. "It is just water," he panted, his voice weak. "Keep climbing." They climbed for an eternity. They climbed in utter darkness, in a space so tight it scraped the skin from their bones. Behind them, they heard the faint shouts of Mr. Stone, angry and frustrated. They could not follow. The tunnel was too small for them. And then she saw it, a pinprick of light, not the bright light of day, but the pale blue light of night. She burst out, falling onto a small, high ledge. She was covered in dirt and rock dust and his blood. Dak tumbled out behind her. He did not land. He just collapsed. He lay on the stone, his body a broken, discarded thing, his breath coming in ragged, terrible sobs that were more blood than air. They were on a high ledge, miles, it seemed. From where they had been, the sun was setting. They were free, and he was dying. "No," Eliza said, her voice numb. "No, not now, not after that." She crawled to him. His wound, the one she had bound, had been torn open by the climb. It was a ragged, terrible mouth, and it was over. "Dak," she whispered. He opened his eyes. He looked at her, and then he looked past her, at the sky. The sun was going down. The world was on fire. The sky was a river of scarlet and gold and a deep, aching purple. The mountains were black, jagged silhouettes against the impossible color. It was the most beautiful, terrible thing she had ever seen. "It is beautiful," he whispered, his voice a dry leaf. "Do not look at that," she said, her voice breaking. "Look at me. Stay. You promised. You stayed." "I am tired," he breathed. "Eliza, I am so tired." "I know." She wept, her hands going to his face. "I know. You did it. You saved me." He shook his head, a tiny, pained movement. "No, you saved me." His eyes were losing focus. "I was a ghost for so long. You made me real." "Dak." "I am free," he whispered, and he smiled. It was a real smile. The lines of pain were gone. "And you are free." "I do not want to be free," she sobbed, her heart breaking. I want you." He raised his hand. It was weak, so weak. It was covered in his own blood. He touched her cheek, his fingers leaving a dark, wet streak. "You are my breath," he whispered, his voice so soft she almost did not hear it. "You are my home." And his hand fell, and his eyes closed. She sat there, on the high, lonely ledge, under the dying, magnificent sky. She held his hand. She held the hand of the man who had taught her to fight, and to live, and to be free. She held him, as the world went from gold to purple, to a cold, terrible, star-dusted black. She was alone, truly, finally, alone. But the night was not silent. She was not silent. She was weeping. And then she was not. The fire, the anger, it came back, a cold, hard, pure thing. She looked at his face. He was peaceful. He was free. She was not. She still had one fight left. She gently laid his head down. She took his knife from his boot. She checked the pistol, the one she had not loaded. She loaded it. She checked the rifle. She was not a wife. She was not a victim. She was his vengeance. She stood up. She looked down at the world below. They were down there. Stone, the other man, they were hunting her. She smiled, a cold, hard, terrible smile. "Good," she whispered to the stars. Come and find me." She was no longer the hunted. She was the hawk. The ledge was a shelf of cold stone, high in an unforgiving, star-filled sky. Eliza sat, her back pressed against the rock, and stared into the vast, dark emptiness. The wind was a knife, sharp and thin, and it did nothing to numb the new, hollow cold inside her. He was beside her. Dakota Hawk, his body, which had been a thing of fluid, powerful grace, was now just a body, a weight, a memory. His head was in her lap. His hand, the one that had held hers, was limp, his fingers still bearing the dark, dried red of his own blood. His last words echoed in the silence. "You are my breath. You are my home." He had given her his breath, and in doing so, had lost his own. He was free. She was alone. A small, dry sob, a sound more of anger than grief, escaped her. She had not wept since the battle. She had not wept when Isa, his face a mask of regret and betrayal, had fallen. She had not wept as she and Dak had clawed their way up the dark, bloody tunnel. She would not weep now. Tears were for the weak. Tears were for the Eliza she had been. The woman in the silk dress, the woman who sat on this ledge was someone else. She was the woman who had watched him, learned from him. She was the woman who had said, "Stay." He had not. Below, in the canyon, a sound, a scrape of a boot on rock. Eliza did not start. She did not flinch. She had been waiting. Her hand, of its own accord, moved. It touched the cold, heavy steel of the pistol in her belt, the one she had loaded. It touched the stock of the rifle resting beside her. "Stone," a voice, faint, echoing up from the darkness. The other man, the one who had not died. "I see it," Stone's voice replied. A dry, educated rasp. "The fissure, that is how they got up. Damn the Indian, find a way, find the long way. It will circle. We will have them by sunrise. They are trapped. He is wounded. She is just a woman." Eliza smiled, a thin, cold, terrible smile that showed her teeth. Just a woman. Good. Let them think that. She looked down at Dak. His face, in the pale starlight, was peaceful. He was, she thought, beautiful. The hard lines of pain and vengeance had softened. He looked like the chief's son, sleeping. "They are coming," she whispered to him, her voice a low, rough thing. "They are coming for you, for us, but I will not let them. I am the hawk. Now, I will protect you." She leaned down, her lips, dry and cracked, brushed his forehead. It was a goodbye, a vow. And he breathed. It was not a breath. It was a sigh, a tremor, a flicker. Eliza froze. Her hand, which had been stroking his hair, stopped. She was imagining it. She was broken by grief. She put her ear to his chest, to the ruined, bloody bandage. She heard nothing. The wind, her own heart, a frantic drum. And then, a beat, slow, faint, as if from a great, great distance. But it was there. Thump. He was not dead. He was not dead. The world, which had been a cold, gray, empty thing, rushed back in a torrent of agonizing, brilliant color. He was not dead. "Dak," she whispered, her voice shaking, all the cold, hard strength of the hawk dissolving into the terror of the woman. "Dakota, do not do this, not like this. Wake up." He was in that place, that shadow world between life and death. The wound, the climb, the loss of blood, he had simply gone away. "Stay," she said, and the word was a command. It was the same one she had used in the canyon. It was her one true prayer. She grabbed the water skin. She put her arm under his head, lifting him. He groaned, a deep, animal sound of pure agony. "I know," she whispered, her tears coming now, hot and fast, dripping onto his face. "I know, but you must drink." She forced the water, a few drops, past his cracked lips. He coughed, a wet, terrible sound, but he swallowed. He was alive. She looked at the wound. It was a thing of nightmares. The climb had torn her clumsy stitches, and it was dark, and it was beyond her. She was not a doctor. "You must," she said, to him, to herself, to whatever God might be listening in this high, lonely place. "You taught me to be strong. Now you must be strong." She sat, her back to the rock, and she pulled him, his head and shoulders, into her lap. She was his shield. She was his warmth. She would hold him here until the sun came. And the sun was coming. A pale, gray, sickly line was appearing on the eastern horizon. And so were they. She heard the sound, a faint scrape, but closer now. From the south end of the long, narrow ledge, they had found the long way. "Deck!" she hissed, her voice urgent. His eyes flickered. They opened. He was not there. He was in the fever, the pain, the fire, he whispered. "No, Dak, no fire! Look at me! Me, Eliza!" His eyes, they focused. He saw her. He saw the tears on her face. He saw the rifle in her hand. And he saw the sunrise. "You are here," he breathed. "I am here," she said. "They are here. Stone, the other one, they are coming." He looked at her. He saw the rifle. He saw the pistol in her belt. He saw her face, streaked with his blood and her tears. He saw the woman she had become, the warrior he had made. And he tried to sit up. A sound, a roar, tore from his throat as the wound in his side ripped with the movement. He fell back, his face ashen, his body slick with a new, cold sweat. "I cannot," he gasped, his voice a thing of pure, terrible failure. "I cannot fight." "I know," she said, her own voice breaking. "You must run," he panted, his hand gripping her arm, his fingers, even in this weakness, still a band of steel. "Eliza, listen, now, you must run. Leave me. You are fast. You are quiet. The way I taught you. You can live." She looked at him, at this man, this chief, this heart. He was, even now, in his final moments, trying to save her. He was trying to give her the freedom he cherished. And she looked at the end of the ledge. The sun was rising, and two dark shapes, silhouetted against the new, bloody light, were walking toward them. "No," she said. "Eliza," he began, his voice a desperate plea. "You said you were tired," she said, her voice soft, but hard as the rock beneath them. "So, you rest here." "They will kill you," he whispered, his eyes wide with a new, fresh terror. A terror not for himself, for her. "No," she said. She put her hand on his chest. "You taught me that weakness is loud. You taught me to be still, to be final." She looked at him. "And you taught me that anger is a fire." She picked up the rifle. She checked the load. She was not the hawk. She was not a lady. She was Eliza, and she was angry. "They took you," she said, her voice a low, terrifying growl. "They hurt you. They took Asa. They will not have this." "Eliza, my love," he breathed, the word a shock. She turned. He had said it. He had. "My breath," he whispered. Do not throw your life away." "I am not throwing it away," she said. She looked at the two men, who were now only 100 yards away. They were walking slowly, confident. "I am choosing. You taught me that, too. I choose this." She turned, her back to him, a lone, small woman in buckskins, facing two professional killers. "Eliza," he roared, or tried to. And in that moment, something broke in him, his fear, his past, the wall he had built between his vengeance and his life. He had spent his life running, hunting, seeking a freedom that was as empty as the prairie, as cold as the wind, a freedom from things, from the past, from pain, from love. And he saw her, standing there. She was not running from anything. She was standing for something, for him. He had been wrong. Freedom was not the absence of a chain. Freedom was knowing what was worth being chained to. He had thought his love for her was a weakness, a distraction, a complication. He looked at her, this woman who had walked out of a parlor and into the fire, this woman who had learned to kill and to bleed and to love him. He realized she was not his weakness. She was his strength. She was not his complication. She was his purpose. Love and freedom, they were not enemies. They were not opposites. They were the same. They were two faces of the same, rare, beautiful, Terrible coin. You could not be free without love, without something to be free for. This was the thing his father had known. The fire that had burned in his side was nothing. A new fire, a pure, hot, beautiful fire was burning in his chest. Stone and the other man were 50 yards away. They had stopped. They raised their rifles. "Well, well," Stone's voice called out, full of that dry, mocking amusement. "The little bird has claws." Eliza Dak roared, and this time it was a roar. She turned, shocked. He was on one knee. He was not a dying man. He was Dak. He had his knife in his hand, and he was smiling, not the pained, faraway smile of his death. He was smiling at her. "You missed," he panted, his face white with agony, but his eyes were on fire. "Dak, you said never let me go. I am holding on." He looked past her, at Stone. "You came for the hawk," he yelled, his voice cracking. "Here I am." "Brave words," Stone said, "for a dead man." He fired. The bullet, it did not hit Dak. It hit Eliza. She gasped. A small, sharp, impossible sound. She staggered, a dark, flowering stain on her shoulder. "No," Dak whispered. Stone, he had not been aiming at Dak. He had been aiming at her. Eliza fell to one knee, but she did not drop the rifle. She raised it. Her arm was shaking. "I am still here," she hissed through gritted teeth. And she fired. Her shot, it hit the man next to Stone. The other man, he grabbed his chest, his eyes wide, and he fell. One left. Stone looked at his partner. He looked at Eliza. He looked at Dak. And his amusement, it was gone. "You bitch," he spat. He raised his rifle, to finish her. "No," Dak said. He was moving. He was not fast. He was a broken thing. He was crawling, dragging himself, his wound tearing him apart. He was going to her. "Dak, no!" she gasped, her shoulder on fire. "Run!" "No more running," he panted, his hand closing on her ankle. He was putting himself between her and Stone. He was his own shield. "Get up," he ordered her, his voice a rasp. "Get up. We finish this. Together." He pushed her, and she stood. She stood, her left arm useless, her body screaming. He stood, leaning on her, his arm over her good shoulder, the knife in his hand. They were one, a broken, bleeding, perfect thing. Stone stared. He had never seen anything like this. This is my home," Dak whispered, his voice for her. "This is my breath." He looked at Stone. "You cannot have her." And together they charged. The charge was not a run. It was a fall, a staggered, desperate, lurching of two broken bodies, held together by one single, shared will. Mr. Stone was a professional. He was not a barroom brawler. He was a man of cold calculation. He saw them coming, this thing, this two-headed, four-legged creature of blood and buckskin. He saw the dying Indian, his face a white mask of agony, the knife in his hand. He saw the woman, her left arm hanging useless, her shoulder a ruin. But her right arm was swinging the heavy rifle like a club. He did not panic. He aimed for the man, the true threat. But the woman was faster. She was not a lady. She was not a warrior. She was a force. She was a mother bear. She was a storm. Her swing, fueled by a desperation that was beyond strength, was true. The heavy wooden stock of the rifle connected with the side of Stone's head. There was a hard, wet thud. Stone's face, in that fraction of a second, changed. The cold amusement, the professional anger, it vanished. It was replaced by a simple, profound, and very human surprise. His shot, the one intended for Dak's heart, went wild. It roared, deafening, into the new, clean morning. the bullet singing off into the vast, indifferent blue. And in that moment, Dak was on him. It was not a fight, it was gravity, it was the end. Dak, with the last, final, impossible surge of his life, fell forward. He did not stab, he just fell. His weight, and the woman's weight, and the knife all came down together. Stone made a sound, a soft oof. And then, all three of them were a tangle on the stone, a heap of bleeding, exhausted, broken humanity. The ledge, high on the top of the world, was silent. The sun, which had been a red promise, was now a golden eye, and it illuminated the scene with a cruel, beautiful clarity. Stone was on his back. His eyes were open. He was staring at the sky. He was not, Eliza realized, breathing. The knife, Dak's knife, was buried to the hilt in his chest. He was dead. The last one, the final enemy, he was gone. Eliza was lying half on top of him. Her body was a symphony of pain. Her shoulder was not just a fire. It was a white, blinding nova. She tried to move, and a scream, thin and reedy, tore from her own throat. Dak! She rolled, agonizingly, off the dead man. Dak was beside her. He was on his back. His eyes were closed. His chest was not moving. The charge, the final effort, it had taken everything. No, she whispered. The word was a dry, cracked thing. No, not now. We won. Dak, we won. She crawled. She was a broken, wounded animal. She crawled the 2 feet that separated them. She put her hand, her good hand, on his chest. The bandage, the one she had tied it, was gone, torn away, and the wound in his side, it was not a wound. It was his life. It was open. Dak, she wept. The tears she had held back, they came, a hot, silent, terrible flood. You fool, you brave fool. You came back, and I let you. She put her head on his chest, her ear to his heart. The silence, the terrible, absolute silence. No, you are not leaving me, she hissed. The words, a snarl. I did not fight this hard. I did not come this far. You will not leave me here. She sat up. Her good hand she balled it into a fist, and she hit him. She hit him in the center of his chest. A hard, desperate, loving, furious thump. Stay, she screamed. And the word was a roar, a prayer, a command that echoed off the high, lonely rocks. And he coughed. It was a wet, terrible, rattling sound. His body, in a violent, impossible spasm, arched. His eyes flew open. And he saw her. Eliza, he breathed. The word was a bubble of blood and air. I am here, she sobbed, her body collapsing onto his, her hand, her good hand, covering the terrible, open thing in his side. I am here. You are here. We are here. He looked at her. He looked at the dead man, Stone, just feet away. He looked at the sky. He smiled, a weak, bloody, beautiful smile. We won, he whispered, and he passed out. The temporary safety of the outline was not a comfort. It was a prison. They were on a high, exposed ledge. Dak was unconscious, and she knew, closer to death than he had been even in the fever. She was wounded. Her left arm a useless, heavy, burning weight. They had no food. They had, perhaps, half a water skin. And the world was still out there. Eliza, for a long moment, just sat. She held Dak's hand. She watched the sun climb. She was tired. She was so very, very tired. She could just sit here. She could just let go. They could be free. Together. The thought was a comfort. It was a dark, soft, easy bed. You will learn to be hard, like the land. His voice, in her head. She looked at him. His face, even in this, was strong. She looked at her own hand, the one that was calloused and dirty and strong. No, she said to the empty sky. Not like this. She got to her knees. The movement sent a bolt of white-hot lightning through her shoulder, and she cried out, a small, animal sound, but she did underscore not stop. She crawled to Stone. The man her passed. She did not look at his face. She was a scavenger. She was a survivor. She was Dak's woman. She took his pistol. It was fully loaded. She took his box of cartridges. She took his knife. She took his water skin. It was full. She took his saddlebags, which he must have carried up. Inside, dried beef, hardtack, a bottle, whiskey. She almost wept, not for joy, for tools. She crawled to the other man, the one she had shot. She did not look at his face either. She took his rifle, his ammunition, his water. She was now armed. She was now supplied. She crawled back to Dak. "Now," she whispered, "now we live." The next few days, they were not days. They were a haze, a fever dream of pain and work and a terrible, clinging hope. The tension, it was palpable. It was not, will they be together? That was settled. That had been settled the moment they charged. The tension was, will they live? And what then? Eliza, she became something new. She was a healer. She took the whiskey, and she poured it into her own wound. The scream, she bit it back. She tore a strip from Stone's clean shirt, and she bound herself. She made a sling. She had to be able to work. Then Dak. He was a ruin. The wound, she could not look. You must, she told herself. She cleaned it. He did not wake. She poured the whiskey into him. He convulsed, a terrible, silent arching of his back, but he did not wake. And she stitched. She took the sinew from Ace's pack, the bone needle, and she sewed. Her hand, her good hand, it was steady. It was the same hand that had done needlepoint. It was final. She stitched him closed. She bound him, and she waited. He woke on the third day. His eyes opened. He saw her. She was sitting her back to the rock, her arm in the sling. Her face was pale, but she was awake. She was guarding him. "You look terrible," he whispered. His voice was a dry rasp. She laughed. It was a rusty, broken sound. "You look worse," she whispered back. "The others?" he asked. "Dead?" she said. "I saw." "Dead," she said, and her voice, it broke. "He chose," Dak said. He closed his eyes. "He chose his brother." "Yes," she said. They were silent. The tension, it was not just about them. It was about the future. "My husband," she said, her voice a dead, flat thing. He opened his eyes. "Stone, he was a Pinkerton," she said. "He said my husband is a rich man, a patient man. He will send more." This was the truth. This was the shadow. Dak, his vengeance was over. Hers, it was just beginning. Dak, he looked at her. He saw the fear, the exhaustion. He reached his hand, the one that was not covered in his own dried blood. He touched her cheek. "Then we will be ready," he said. His voice was weak, but the words, they were steel. "We cannot run," she said. "You are hurt. I am hurt." "We will not run," he said. "We will heal." "And then?" she asked. He looked at the sky, the vast, open, free sky. "You are my home," he said. "You are my tribe. We do not need a town. We do not need a place." He looked at her, and his eyes, they were not the eyes of a ghost. They were the eyes of a chief. "We are the place," he said. "He cannot find us, not if we do not want to be found. This land, it hides us. It protects us." She looked at him. She saw it. A new life, not a life of running, not a life of fighting. A life of being. A life where love was not a prison, and freedom was not being alone. A life where they could be both, together. "How?" she whispered. "We heal," he said. "We go high, where the air is thin, where the world does not go. We become shadows. We become ghosts. But this time, we do it together." She leaned forward. She put her forehead against his. His skin was hot. He still had the fever, but she felt it. The future, it was not a promise. It was not a guarantee. It was a choice. "All right," she whispered, her own blood and sweat and tears mixing with his. "All right, we heal, and then we disappear." The conflict, it was resolved. The tension, it was still there. A thin, high wire of what if, but it did not matter. They were together. They had survived. They were alive. And for now, on that high, lonely, bloody ledge, that was enough. The sun on the high ledge was not gentle. It was a sterile, clarifying light, a high country light that left no room for shadows or for lies. It exposed the 3 dead men, their bodies already beginning to look like discarded, broken things. And it exposed the 2 who were left. Eliza sat, her back to the rock, for what felt like a lifetime. The pain in her left shoulder was a dull, hot, heavy thing, a fire that had burned down to embers. But the fire in her heart that was cold, it was the cold, clear, calculating anger that had seen her through the final charge. Dakota Hawk was in her lap. He was not a warrior. He was not a ghost. He was a man who was breathing. His breath was so shallow, so faint. She could only tell he was alive by the small, damp puff of air that misted her own hand when she held it, trembling over his lips. He was alive, but he was, she knew, in a way that defied medicine. Leaving, his body was a ruin. The wound in his side, the one she had sewn shut in the dark, had been ripped open. It was a death wound. His vengeance was complete, and his body, his spirit, had simply let go. She, on the other hand, had not. "No," she said. The word was a dry scrape. She looked at the men who were dead, the men who had hunted her. Mr. Stone, her past, her husband's long, cold, rich hand. It was over, but it was not. She knew, with a certainty that was as cold as the morning air, that her husband was a patient man. He was a man of commerce. He did not forgive a debt, and he saw her as a debt. He would send more men, not killers, perhaps, but men with paper, men with the law. They would find her. They would drag her back. And him, they would hang him. A new kind of terror, one that was far worse than the fear of bullets, settled on her. The fight was not over. It had just changed. She looked down at Dak. His face was pale, his lips blue. He was dying of the cold, and the loss of blood, and the simple giving up. "You taught me to be hard," she whispered to his unconscious face, her good hand stroking the black, sweat-matted hair from his forehead. "You taught me to fight. You taught me to stay. Now it is your turn. You will learn from me." With an agonizing, slow, and brutal effort, she began to move. First, the dead. She could not, she had to. She owed them nothing. She owed him everything. Using her good arm and her legs, she crawled. She pushed. She did not look at their faces. Stone, the other one, she pushed them, one by one, to the edge of the high, narrow ledge, and she pushed them over. It was not a burial. It was sanitation. It was her declaration. The world, that world was gone. Then she went back to Dak. She was a healer. She was his woman. She took the whiskey she had scavenged. She took the last of the clean cloth from Stone's shirt. Her own shoulder, it was a thing of fire. She ignored it. She cleaned his wound. She poured the alcohol into it. He did not move. She took the needle, the sinew, and in the cold, bright, unforgiving light of day, she sewed him back together. Her stitches were not small. They were not neat. They were strong. She bound him with strips of buckskin. Then she took his head in her lap. She took her own cloak, the one he had made her from rabbit skins, and she wrapped him. She huddled over him. She was his house. She was his fire. She gave him her own body heat. "You will not die," she whispered, her lips against his cold forehead. I am your breath. I am breathing for you. You will not go. For 10 days, 10 days, they lived on that ledge. She was a marvel. She was a thing she would not have recognized. She set snares. With one hand, she caught 2 small rock rabbits. She skinned them with one hand, and his knife. She made a small, smokeless fire. She made broth. And she fed him. She would lift his head. Eat, she would command, and his lips would open. He was not there, but he obeyed. She would clean the wound. Her own shoulder, it was a hot, angry purple, but it was not bleeding. It was healing. She was hard. She was the land. On the 11th day, he woke. His eyes did not open in a fever. They opened clear. He saw the blue, blue sky. He saw the rock wall. He saw her. She was asleep, sitting up, her head on her chest, her arm in a sling. Her face was thin, so thin. It was the face of a skull, but she was breathing, and in her good hand was his knife. She was guarding him, even in sleep. He did not speak. He just watched her. He saw the woman he had almost left, the woman he had told to run, the woman who had stayed. He saw the empty water skins. He saw the small pile of rabbit bones. He saw what she had done. A feeling so profound it was almost a new kind of wound opened in his chest. He had spent his life seeking vengeance. He had spent his life running from the ghosts of his tribe. He had been wrong. His tribe was here. He reached out. His hand was shaking. It was a thing of bone. He touched her hand. The one with the knife. Her eyes snapped open. In 1 second, she was awake. She was a predator. The knife was up. And then she saw him. She saw his eyes. "Dak," she breathed. The knife clattered to the stone. She did not weep. She just looked. "You stayed," he whispered. His voice was a shadow. "You stayed," she whispered back. They did not talk of love. They did not talk of the past. "Water," he said. She gave him water. "Food," he said. She gave him the last of the broth. "We must go," he said. "Yes," she said. It took them a month to crawl down from that ledge. They were 2 broken things, 2 old people. His wound in his side, it was a constant pain. Her shoulder, she would never lift her left arm high again. They were marked. They were scarred. They were a match. They did not go down to the towns. The towns were the past. The towns were her husband. The towns were the law that had put a bounty on his head. They went up. They went where the air was thin. They went where the maps were white. They went to a high green valley that Dak had known of as a boy, a place his father had called the place where the sky rests. It was hidden. It was safe. And they built. They did not build a house. They built a home. They found a shallow cave, like the ones that had sheltered them, and they built a wall of stone and sod. They made a door of woven willow. They made a fire in the center. Eliza, she was not a lady. She was a pioneer. She learned to use her one good arm with a strength of 2. She found wild onions. She found berries. She made a garden, a small, stubborn, impossible garden of beans and squash. Dak, he was not a warrior, not anymore. His vengeance was gone. He was a builder. He was a partner. He could not hunt the way he used to. His side ached, but he could trap. He could fish. He taught her to shoot the rifle, the one she had taken from Stone. She became the hunter. Their relationship, it was not fire. It was water. It was deep and quiet, and it reflected the sky. They had a language. It was not words. It will be a touch of a hand, a shared look as the sun went down, a silence by the fire that was more comfortable than any parlor in the East. One evening, years had passed. It was not clear how many. Time was measured in seasons, not in clocks. Eliza, she was standing outside their home. She was not the pale, thin girl. Her face was brown from the sun. Her hair was streaked with gray. There were lines around her eyes. She was beautiful. She was strong. She was looking at the valley. Their valley. Dak came and stood beside her. He did not touch her. He just stood. He was leaner. His face was carved by the wind. The ghost in his eyes was gone. He was just a man. "He will not find us," she said. It was not a question. "Her husband, the world below." "No," Dak said. This is our world. He has no power here." "I was so afraid," she whispered. In that house, I thought freedom was running away. I thought it meant being alone." "Freedom," Dak said, his voice low and sure. "Freedom is not being alone. Freedom is being able to choose who you are with." He looked at her, and his eyes held the high, clear sky. "You are a warrior," he said. "I am a gardener," she said, and she smiled. "That too," he agreed. She had fled a life where she was a possession. She had found a life where she was a partner. She had learned that true love, it was not a cage. It was not a sacrifice. It was acceptance. It was looking at a broken, scarred man and seeing a home. It was looking at a broken, scarred woman and seeing a tribe. It was the freedom to be exactly who they were, together. Dak, he reached out. He took her hand, her goods hand, his scarred hand. "The sun is setting," he said. "Yes," she said, "it is beautiful." They turned, together, and walked back into their home. They were not two broken people. They were one whole life. They were the acceptance. They were the loyalty. They were the freedom. Thank you so much for listening to our story. I am always so curious to know where you are listening from, so please let me know in the comments below. It is a wonderful way for us to connect and share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this tale, please consider hitting that subscribe button for my channel, Wild West Tales, and giving this video a like. And if you really want to help, press that hype button to share this story with more listeners. Thank you again.